Hi, and welcome to the TBK podcast. We're here to chat all things boxing. And before I get started, please hit the like and share button and please subscribe. Follow us on all other social media platforms. I'm your host, Roy, and I'm joined by Nick and I'm joined by Richard. Yep. Hi, guys.
You all right?
Yes, Roy. Evening.
Bless.
So we're going to speak a little bit about Kell Brook. As we know, it's been a few weeks since he's lost to Terrance Crawford. And what we're going to talk about is where does Brook go now? So, Nick and Rich, where does Brook go from here? After the loss of Spence, Triple G, and of course, Bud Crawford, do you still think he's got a career or do you feel that he needs to retire?
You know, I think the only thing that I would have liked to see Kell Brook do and maybe see him do would fight Amir Khan. You know, that would be the one.
You still feel that there's a fight worth watching there, and the public would be interested?
I don't really know. Like, it's not as big as it could have been or should have been some time ago. You know, like these guys were getting big fights. Like Amir Khan, instead of facing Canelo, when you look at it in the long run, instead of him facing Canelo, and instead of Kell Brook facing Golovkin and then later Spence, I think back at around that time, it would have been better of them to face each other. For whatever reason, they didn't do it, but it's obviously not as big as that now. But that is the only place I see Kell Brook to go, to be honest, right now.
I agree with Nick completely. I think the British boxing public wanted the Kell Brook Amir Khan fight for a long period of time. It seemed as though Kell Brook was chasing Amir Khan, and he disadvantaged his career, to be honest. So instead of, defending his title at 147, I know he was struggling to make weight, but he did make weight. He's just made it recently for Crawford, so he could have made weight. Instead of doing that, he was following Amir Khan up to 160 and fighting Golovkin because Amir Khan was fighting Canelo, and that shortened his career dramatically. Had he stayed at 147, who knows, he might be the best fighter at 147 at the moment. He shortened his own career. He made poor decision after poor decision. Unfortunately, that was because he based his career around chasing Amir Khan instead of around maximising Kell Brook. I don't think he realised how big of a star he could have been without Amir Khan. He was on Matchroom, and it's turned out Eddie Hearn is probably at the moment the best promoter in the UK. He had Sky, he had a big following. If he had been trying to follow his own pathway, instead of trying to prove that he was better than Amir Khan, it would have benefited him in a number of ways. He probably would have got the bigger fights because Khan might have moved up to fight Canelo, but at the time he had Keith Thurman, who we've seen against Manny Pacquiao was beatable. You had Danny Garcia, who's beatable. You also had Errrol Spence, who we probably would have lost to. But if Kell Brook could have stayed at 147 and he had a beaten Porter, which he did, and then beaten Garcia and beaten Keith Thurman, and then lost to Errol Spence, he'd still have an argument for being one of the best welterweights of his era. Instead, he chased Amir Khan around and he shortened his career. I think right now, Kell Brook and Amir Khan don't have many options. I'd still be interested in seeing that fight because Amir Khan has been knocked out multiple times, so it's not as though he can really criticise him or his fan base can criticise Kell Brook for losing to Golovkin, Errol Spence, and Terrance Crawford. That's really a list of three great fighters, isn't it? So
do we still put Kell Brook in the elite category?
No,
at the moment.
No.
I would say the same as well. No.
So going forward, the only fight they've both got is to have a UK-based fight, which is basically going to be for the casuals, because for them to sell enough to actually warrant a promoter doing it. And at the moment, neither one of them are with someone like Eddie Hearn for the UK, as we just mentioned. But would you not want to see these guys still against someone similar to like a Brandon Rios or even a Danny Garcia for Kell Brook? Someone who's going to be in the ring trading, or do you feel that he's at the point where his confidence has gone because each time he gets in the ring, and gets touched where he's actually had his orbital broken, he kind of gonna back off and want to quit the fight?
I think that Kell Brook can still fight, but Brandon Rios or Danny Garcia are two completely different challenges. Danny Garcia, despite him losing to Spence as well, is a very good fighter with a lot of power. It's another fight at world level, and I think with some of the other, I don't know if Brook is at that level anymore. I think he's not world level. He's still a very good fighter. He's still got all of the skills needed. It's mental with Brook, and Khan is world level with regards to speed, but Khan's getting dropped by no names. He got dropped recently, didn't he? Not his last fight, the fight before, and I can't remember the guy's name who dropped him. Khan gets dropped all the time. He's vulnerable. So even now, I mean, tell me if you think different. Even now, I think Khan can win against Kell Brook, but he's also very beatable.
I think Brook's style will eventually work him out. The sort of counter puncher he was. I think Khan was great at 140, unbelievable. But the fact is that at 147, going up and down, I feel going up to middleweight for both of them has affected them, having to keep coming down to 147. And I feel that's one of the reasons why Khan doesn't want to fight again at 147, and probably can't make 140. There isn't anyone specifically out there for Khan, I believe, and I don't believe there's anyone right now in, as we just said, world level that. Even though I believe Kell Brook, with the right promoter, will get that fight again at world level, I just don't want to see him going out like that. Kind of like having, I think it's his last 4 fights, he's had 3 losses now. And it's not very good on your record. So, was it partly, like you said a minute ago, partly a mental aspect that he may have lost? Do you feel that he would have had a little bit more of a stronger confidence having Dominic Ingle in the corner?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, gradual steps. If you think about, if you're making a long-term career, then gradual steps are more of like a sure way to go. But if you're going to try and leap up, like you say, and leap into certain fights that you may be in deep water, then, you've got a chance of, deteriorating the long-term, plans for your career and that. But what you just said, I thought would be interesting. Kell Brook versus Danny Garcia. I mean, they've both had a loss against top fighters, but I actually, when you said it, I didn't really think about it before, but when you said it, I did think to myself, that would actually be interesting. So, I wouldn't write off Brook. I wouldn't write him off, but I don't think against the elite. I don't think so Danny Garcia, he's the guy that just lost his fight there. So, that possibly could happen. But not against like an elite fighter, as Golovkin. And
at the moment, these guys can go in with the younger generation of welterweights. We've seen that with the likes of Spence and Crawford dominating, and these guys are some of the best welterweights we've seen for a very long time. So having given Kell Brook the opportunity to get in the ring with those guys, I can't say I'm going to devalue his credentials of trying to fight someone like a Thurman who lost to Pacquiao, or a Garcia, who also just lost to Spence. I think it's a very good fight. I think the styles match up very well. But do we believe him again if he does it again, or does he go back to Dominic Ingle and say, look, let's try again. Let's go for like the likes of Danny Garcia. And
do you think the shot that ended the fight was a particularly hard shot?
I felt I was watching the fight, and when I watched the fight at the end of round 3, I was actually watching it with Nick, and we sat there and I said, I think that's it. And he kind of staggered a little bit, and it wasn't a big shot in the end of round 3 either. But when he came out the next round, obviously we saw the adaptation of Terrance Crawford. And when he caught him, sometimes it's the shot you don't see, and he staggered across the ring, and we've never seen that with Brook. And I thought, okay, there must be a little bit of power behind these shots that we're seeing, even though they look like they're little pot shots. He's taken them across the ring, the fight got stopped. And the one thing he said to the ref and his corner was like, what happened? Like he actually didn't know what happened. So that's when I realised he was in a bigger fight than he actually believed himself. And at the end of the fight, he also said that the Americans are a little bit more advanced than us in the UK. Which, where do we go from here? If we're looking at all these welterweights, we haven't got many to throw out there. These guys are beating what we believed at one point to be our best. Kell Brook was
I don't agree with that. I know it's mad. I don't agree with what Brook said.
Neither do I.
So you don't believe the American system of training and coming up through whatever they're doing different to us in the amateurs and becoming professionals, that they have a better quality of fighters at welterweight?
No.
Would it be, no, not at all. Why is that then, Richard? I'll ask you a question.
No way. In this country, in England, there's a population of 50 million people. In the UK, is it about 60 million?
60 million
in the UK?
Yeah, a little bit more, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in England alone, it's about 50 million. But let's just say the UK, so just over 60 million. And in America, you've got a population of 350 million. Yeah?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So mathematically, in order for them to be, performing just at our level, they should have 7 times the amount of champions that we do. But they don't. So per capita, per 1,000 people, in the UK, you're more likely to be a champion than you are in America. So if anything, we're performing at a higher level than we should be and a higher level than them. If they were performing per 1,000 people at the level we would, they'd have even more champions. I think the difference is, and the reason why they have more champions is simply because they're a bigger nation.
But also,
that's it.
Also to take into account that a lot of their athletes go towards American football first before they go towards boxing. So we usually get those who ain't very good at NFL, like the Dominic Brazils and the Wilders. Not saying they're not good, but obviously they weren't so successful in that field. They've come over to another field and they have been more successful. Whereas a lot of our guys growing up here, the British mentality for a lot of boxers are, this is the route I'm going first before sometimes football.
Yeah.
So in essence, I feel that Brook fought at a very high level. I never thought he was an elite fighter, but I do believe he was a world level fighter. And obviously, he beat Porter, he took the belt. Mm-hmm. But when he come up against slightly harder opposition in the likes of Spence and obviously Terrance, he didn't fail against Spence, because obviously we know that he was winning the fight at the time, and I believe he could have won that had he not taken the Triple G fight. But against Terrance Crawford, I never had him winning that fight at any point. Before the fight, during the fight, I always thought he was going to lose to the smaller fighter. And
I think he is mentally affected a bit by his injury. Like, who wouldn't be in a sport where, is in a dangerous sport, and then you're fighting top fighters? Do you get what I'm saying to you? So I do think he has been mentally affected by his injury.
So should he just not fight at 154 and see how many more fights he's got left in him?
Well, like you say, he's got a few options. He's got a few options there.
He doesn't want to fight the Charlos, but we're not also going to see him fight the champions at welterweight. So he doesn't have to fight the Charlos.
I think he'd be more confident.
Yeah,
you're right.
He's not a top contender right now. Let's be honest. He's not. If you've lost the last few, do you get what I'm saying to you?
So if he went to junior middleweight, what about an option to fight someone like Lara?
Lara beats him.
Yeah. I mean, yes.
You can argue Lara beat Canelo.
So then where do we go? Where does that come back to the question then? So where does Brook go from here?
There could still be interest in him having certain fights, like what you said before with who's it you mentioned before?
Danny Garcia.
Maybe also Keith Thurman. It could generate some interest, but at the same time, he's kind of, I wouldn't say suspect. I'm not saying the guy's heart is not in it, but I just think he's mentally slightly kind of affected.
If anything, the best fight is the Amir Khan fight. The problem is, I think it's Amir Khan's ego, because that's the biggest fight financially for the two of them, because you've had a nation full of people wanting to see that fight for a long time. If that fight were to happen, even though they're both past their best, it would still bring in a lot of money. If it was at Wembley, I'd happily go to Wembley to watch it.
So would I.
Today,
yeah,
so.
I think I would as well.
I think I'd go as well.
So the money's there. The problem is, Amir Khan has always felt that he was a bigger star than Kell Brook, and he's not prepared. He might be right. I'm not saying that he isn't, but that's always been in his head. And he's always wanted Kell Brook either to not fight him because he felt that he was too big for Kell Brook, or for Kell Brook to submit completely to whatever he wants, which fighters don't tend to do, because they have self-belief and confidence and are not willing to submit to another fighter before the fight's even started. So there was a time when Bernard Hopkins, he was going to fight, he was speaking about fighting Adonis Stevenson.
Yeah.
And he called Adonis Stevenson over to pose with him. And Adonis Stevenson, I think, stood next to him. And Bernard Hopkins told him, oh no, don't stand there. Kneel here or something in front of him. And then Adonis Stevenson did it. And Hopkins turned to Oscar De La Hoya and said, I've already got him doing what I want, so he's going to do what I want in the fight as well.
Wow. Yeah.
Hopkins was like that. He was very cerebral. And it's true in boxing, when one person's already dictating to another outside of the ring, a lot of the time it will transfer into the ring. The fight will be at that person's pace and they'll dictate the way things happen. So you can't allow another man that you're going to fight potentially to dictate to you how to do things. It has to be, no, you can speak through others, but you can't direct me because you're not in control of me. And I feel like that's what Amir Khan's tried to do with Kell Brook. He's tried to...
But the issue that you said is that Amir Khan has been on Brook's mind for years. He's never been able to do an interview without mentioning Khan. He's never been able to go to his training sessions. Everything we always knew was Khan this and Khan that. And until he gets Khan out of his head, he can't move forward, because right now he doesn't have a promoter. He doesn't have a trainer that's recognised.
Yeah.
And he's coming off of 3 out of 4 losses from 4 fights, and that's not really helping his career, as well as most other fighters know his weak spot at the moment.
Yeah.
So getting in there with another elite or world-class fighter, we know how that fight's going to go, unless he learns to adapt.
Yeah.
So we're basically saying the same thing. So we're going to wrap this one up, guys.
Yeah.
And we know that we all believe that Kell Brook's still got a little bit left in the tank. It's either a fight with Garcia, if he can get that fight to define a little bit more of his legacy with Pacquiao and get some money, or it's time for him to retire.
Also another quick point, it's just like how fighters develop differently. Yeah. So back in the day when Kell Brook beat Shawn Porter, a lot of people would say, oh well, Shawn Porter, he's like on the way down or whatever. But if you look at his career, he's kind of come back and he's 40 elite fighters, like the top fighters still. So they develop at different rates. And then also Amir Khan developed before his career, kind of developed from the Olympics and that before Kell Brook. So I guess they had some kind of local rivalry building up over the years or whatever.
The thing with Porter as well is Porter has quite a few losses on his record as well, but still stays very relevant.
Highest level.
And obviously he's been the champion as well. And he's been in there with some of the best, but he's also lost 3 fights.
Yeah.
So, but he's lost to very credible opponents. So it's not as though that we can say that Brook lost to really poor performing fighters. He's lost to 3 of the best fighters that we've seen of our generation: Gennady Golovkin, Spence, and Crawford. So that's why I believe he still has something left to prove. I'm not too sure that if he's ever going to get back to being the champion again, but he definitely can still challenge to a level with, as you said, the Furmans. The Furman, I think, fight is a very good one to get, especially coming off the back of the actual Pacquiao fight. And then you've got Garcia, and I think that style is great for Brook, and that's the way he should go. Have you got anything to conclude, Rich?
I agree with the two of you. I think, to be honest, unfortunately, I think that he's actually decided that he's going to retire. But I agree with the two of you. There are fights out there for him, but he'd have to choose his level. He'd have to choose the correct fights. It's a shame that his career's ended like this. It's kind of an anticlimax, and I think it would be good if he could have a swan song where he, at Wembley, him against Khan, with half of the UK there, win, lose or draw. Khan might beat him now, because one thing that Khan has is accuracy and speed, so there's a good chance he'll probably land on the eye, a few times. But even so, they're both going to earn a lot of money, and the fight that the UK has won, they'll receive it. So I think that there are fights out there for him, but I doubt that he'll take them. I don't think that he'll fight again, unfortunately.
2020 has been a difficult year for all boxers. Let's see what his decision is in 2021. We're going to wrap this podcast up. I'm Roy, your host. I've been joined by Richard and Nick. It's been great chatting with you guys.
Cool.
Follow us, like and subscribe, comment and share.
And this is the TBK podcast.